The real Floki from Vikings died this way, the dark truth. We all adore Floki for his personality. He made us feel happy, sad, scared, and safe. But did the real Floki ever exist? Yes. You're watching Historical Saga, and today we'll learn a lot of truths concerning real Floki's death today. Do subscribe to our channel and stay with us all the way to the end. Many of you might be familiar with the Vikings TV character Floki. Here he is depicted as a brilliant boat builder who is wholly devoted to the Norse gods. He is also shown as a legendary warrior who took part in innumerable conflicts, whether they were in the icy climates of Scandinavia, Paris, Wessex, or the Mediterranean. About Floki. Legendary literature includes the tale of Floki. His tale is presented here. Every time someone is killed, we sense his sorrow as his dreams slowly fade away. However, he is credited with settling in Iceland, a barren continent that served as a haven for dreamers. Although we don't know much about Floki's early years, here are some things we do know. He was born sometime during the Viking Age's highlight in the 9th century. On his father, Vilgerð, who was reportedly a great Viking, we do not have much information. As we can see, Floki had a last name that means son of Vilgerð, Vilgerðarson. Given that the majority of the information on him comes from the Volsunga Saga, the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, and the Gesta Danorum, there is no proof that he was best friends with Ragnar Lothbrok. At the same time, the Landnámabók text contains proof that Floki did in fact exist. The Viking conquest of England under Floki. When we first see Floki, he's in charge of a single ship's crew. When the great heathen army was in existence, Floki was part of its ranks. They reached England sometime around 865 AD. Therefore, it's probable that Floki was a Viking raider during these periods, though no one is entirely sure. As Floki was not in charge of an army at the time, it is not known if he was present. Additionally, only the war commanders and the progeny of the fabled Ragnar Lothbrok were truly remembered during the Viking conquest of England. Iceland's discovery by Floki. He played a significant role in the discovery and settling of Iceland, one of Floki's major Viking plotlines. This makes it obvious that Hrafna-Flóki, or Raven Floki, was used to name the character on the show. One of the earliest Vikings to travel to Iceland was Vilgerðarson. However, the tale of Floki, as told on the show, is essentially a synthesis of the accounts of many Vikings who found Iceland in the 9th century. It was recorded in the two manuscripts that have survived, Icelandic, the Book of Iceland, and Landnámabók, the Book of Settlement. Actually, according to these books, Iceland was not initially discovered by the Vikings. They mentioned a group of Christian monks from Ireland, and the Hebrides, known as the Paper, may have already been seeking isolation in Iceland. But when Nordstorm started to arrive, it is believed that they intelligently left. Floki's excursion. Hrafna-Flóki is recognized as the first person to purposely set sail to Iceland, not as its discoverer. The tales of two previous men, Nádór and Garðar Svavarsson, served as the inspiration for Floki's voyage on Viking ships to explore Iceland. According to legend, Nádór was a Norwegian Viking who settled the Faroe Islands among the first people, a group of islands that are located in the middle of the sea between Scotland, Norway, and Iceland. He got blown off course on one of his trips between Norway and the Faroe Islands and ended up on Iceland's east coast. He did some exploring but met some new people, so he headed off once more and soon arrived at his starting point. Garðar also got to Iceland by pure accident. To claim his fortune, he set off to the Faroe Islands, but when he arrived in Iceland, he realized he had been blown off course extremely far. Although he also made landfall on the east coast, he circumnavigated the area to show it was an island. On the north coast, in a location he named Húsavík, which translates to House Bay, he appears to have built a modest residence for himself. He gave the island the name Garðarshólmi in honor of himself before departing. Floki's return to Norway. When the ship and Floki as well as his crew arrived back in Norway, it appeared that Floki believed that the place was hostile and suggested that it should not be settled. However, his crew was far more optimistic, and word of the new continent quickly spread. The Vikings were perpetual explorers, and it wasn't only because they were daring. To feed their expanding population, the Vikings required additional land to crop. When examining the intention of the Vikings to establish farming settlements in England, the Vikings TV show briefly touched on this period of history. In order to live more freely, many Vikings also sought to avoid paying taxes and playing an increasingly centralized role. As Harald becomes the first king of all of Norway, this is another topic that the show deals with. After learning about the new territory, the chieftain Ingolfr Argnarsson organized an expedition in 874 AD that helped Reykjavik establish a more prominent Norse colony there. Good lands, grazing and farming contributed to the colony's success. Despite his protests, Floki returned to Iceland, where he continued to reside until his death. The real death of Floki. The much-anticipated discussion of the story about Floki's real death has finally arrived. But first, remember to subscribe to Historical Saga if you haven't done so already, and don't forget to drop a like on the video. Hrafna-Flóki Vilgerðarson, the first Norseman to sail to Iceland on purpose, is a loose inspiration for Floki. In contrast to the Vikings Floki, who was by this time already by himself because Helga and their daughter had passed away, the actual Floki traveled with his family. Although Floki thought Iceland was useless, he returned and stayed there until his death. There is no mention of him entering a cave beneath an active volcano. After some hardship in this new area, Floki and his companions left for Norway. Are there any parallels between real Floki and Vikings Floki? Of course, there are parallels between the actual Floki and the one in Vikings, such as their settlement in Iceland and their eventual disillusionment with it, though for quite different reasons. But the show lacked the necessary emotional impact when Hrafna-Flóki Vilgerðarson passed away. There is still a chance that Floki will appear in Season 6 of Vikings, because his demise hasn't been officially announced, but in any case, the show isn't going to offer him a relatively peaceful demise like the real Flokis. Fact or fiction, Floki. While it is obvious that Floki is not a true representation of any one particular Viking person identified in the historical records, however, despite being a composite of numerous, he effectively captures and embodies a number of significant concepts from Viking history. One of the primary reasons the Vikings were able to dominate their neighbors was the advanced technology of their longboats, which they combined with better weapons and diets. The story of the Viking longships is told in the show using Floki. Many of you might be asking yourselves, why are there no trees in Iceland? Let us explain, because the backstory is quite intriguing. Since the time of the Viking settlers, who decimated the forests that formerly covered a fourth of the country, the majority of the country's trees have been gone. The Vikings' character Floki was unquestionably a fan favorite, and the viewers questioned why Floki didn't perish in the cave during the eruption, despite being relieved that he did. Viking fans were undoubtedly relieved to see Floki alive and well in Season 6 and leading a peaceful life far away from the lands that brought him so much trouble and heartbreak, despite Iceland not being the land of the gods as Floki had hoped. The fact that Floki from Vikings remained one of the last characters still living in the last episodes provided a final touching connection to the original cast. Without a doubt, Hirst's solution for Floki's ending was much more fulfilling than having him pass away in a cave next to a Christian cross. In addition to the story of the fictional Floki, we hope you liked this video by learning more about the events that led to the death of real Floki. Please share in the comment section below your favorite Viking scenes, as well as any interesting Viking-related information you may have. We'll be sure to look into it. We also have several other videos sharing facts about Vikings and their culture as well as their rituals on our channel. If you haven't seen them yet, we urge you to do so right now. Please subscribe to our channel, Historical Saga, and share it with your friends and family before moving on to another video.